I don't know if Preach didn't specifically say that we're supposed to give him at least 24 hours, but I did it anyway. I wanted to stream yesterday, at least just to be able to watch this episode. I decided not to and give him his 24 hours so that his video could naturally get views and then we can react to it, because I think that's just a hell of a lot fairer, because I found the first episode to be incredible. I love the interviews, I love the insights, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the second one is all about.
How do you create World of Warcraft, and how do you create its expansions that go with it? You start with a simple idea, right? We're going to make the open world based on Azeroth, we're going to put in some basic PvP, and then some fundamentals that should go along with it. But then it's popular, people want more, and you now need to build an expansion, so you create some new ideas that expand on other things, and some extra new features to go along with it, but you still got to keep maintaining those original things that people liked. Wrath of the Lich King comes along, same again. Some new features, some expansions on what you want previously, but again, even more to go along with it. Now we reach Cataclysm. Same again, some iteration, some new ideas, and even more that needs to be built up. And pretty soon we're looking at a never-ending, unstable game that can't continue with this. And not only that, it's now taking so long to keep making this that players are waiting forever and ever for the next thing to come out.
If it's not fun today, then 10 years from now it's not going to matter.
So
I do want to say, though, I'm not entirely in agreement. I love the visuals here, and I think the visuals are great. And I agree with the fundamentals of it, but there is one thing that should be highlighted. All of those expansions also removed a lot of content, right? So, like, yes, you would get the core of the content that would be added upon, but then a lot of the sort of content that could have become evergreen content, that could have become content that people could always go back to and enjoy for various reasons, sort of got left by the wayside. And every expansion, they try to go bigger and better than what they did the last time, which is required when you're going to replace an entire expansion with a new expansion. You have to go bigger and better. Whereas if you, from the beginning, had a mindset of no, every expansion has really cool places that we can probably build and expand upon. So, places like Wintergrasp, or even places like Hellfire Peninsula with the 3 barracks that you have to keep as PvP. These were cool concepts that could definitely have been kept in the game and could have been iterated on and reiterated on and made better and kept up with. TBC actually had a few places that they could really have expanded upon in order to keep people coming back to it. Either Crab, by the way, 10 months part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Thank you. And that removal and then the addition of other things, I think, is what eventually creates this unstable mess that you just really can't get out of, because you're constantly forced to go bigger and better than what you did the last time, rather than sort of everything is just part of the game and forms part of the game, and that means that you need to do less in order to actually give people enough stuff to do in the game.
So we come up with a new idea, Era 2. We're going to remove a lot of this, go back to basics. Sure, we're going to keep a few things that people liked and maybe even iterate on them ever so slightly, but essentially we're going to break it back down, and now we're going to come up with a new idea. The borrowed power idea of Season 2. We can strap it on. We can make it interesting. We can make it fun, because ultimately we're going to take it away. But now here's the problem. We're back down to here. And it doesn't matter how differently we make this and the different shape it comes with. At the end of the expansion,
Alex Kays, how you doing, bro? Thanks for the first time chat. I'm playing in EU.
Legion, BFA, Shadowlands, we take it all away. Sure, we might keep 1 or 2 things to go with it, but we're always coming back down to here, and that's not particularly fun for anyone.
None of that would matter if your first 5 seconds didn't make you say, this is awesome.
So now we enter Era 3. This time we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to build on these ideas. We're going to keep iterating on them, But this time, we're going to grow a stronger foundation. We've learned from the mistakes of the past. Instead of just towering everything on top of each other, new ideas can make way. We can now start iterating in much better ways. We can grow a far more wide and vast, stable foundation.
This is what they should have done from day one. Now, of course, hindsight is always going to be 2020. It's easy for us to sit here and go, bro, we've been saying this for years. But when you're in the thick of things and you're trying to make something, it can be daunting. But I think, just off the cuff here, I think Dragonflight has an amazing foundation to start off from. It introduced a new way of travel, and people might look at that and go, well, dude, that's nothing crazy. It is, because it's a really cool new way of traveling. I love the fact that you can customize your dragon. I actually partook in customization for the first time in World of Warcraft actively, because I wanted to make my dragon look a little bit more. I used the green proto-drake for a while. Not the green one, the bronze one. I used that one for a while, but then I wanted to go back to looking a bit more primal, and so I went for the proto-drake, and I gave it all the spikes and shit that I already had unlocked. So I find it really cool. It's a really cool sort of concept that can literally be built upon and made so much bigger as a result of it. The world has a number of things that I would love to see continue. The climbing, I don't think climbing is in a great spot right now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Climbing is decent, but it needs a lot more. I would like to see the ability to eventually speed climb. So, like, to refine the technology to the point where you can really go fast if you want to, and maybe give people more sort of paths to get there, and maybe make it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging in order to get there. But I think the climbing thing is really cool as an outside activity. I've actually kind of enjoyed the photo shit, just for what it is. It's sort of like a break from just general world quests to just take a couple of photos as you're going around and trying to take the best picture. Even though you don't give a shit, you still want to get that great shot, right? Kind of thing as it happens. So I've actually found that really cool. The fishing thing is really awesome, actually. There's so many things that I find to be really cool, and some of it's still rough around the edges, like the profession's still very rough, but I think it's a good foundation. It's a good place to start from, and that's all Dragonflight needs to be. It's a good starting block. From here, I think they can now really start to play with these ideas and implement them to much better perfection in later expansions, while also then building out. Because I think building out is far better than building up. Because building out, you can go basically as wide as you want without ever really running into the, oh my god, what the hell are we doing? This is just getting nuts now.
In order to mix in a lot of these ideas that we learned from, and hopefully make a better game. All sounds good in theory, but who's going to do that? How are they going to do that? And that's what we're going to find out today.
Oh, Mr. Demuria, yes. I actually would love that. If I could use that camera feature inside the game, but I would like to see a couple of changes to the camera feature. The number one change that I would like to see is to be able to actually look through the camera. So instead of sort of having this weird kind of, you know, your character has a light in front of him, you just show it over the animals, they sort of light up. I would love to have the ability to look through the camera, see the camera lanes and everything. And it's gonna sound so niche to a lot of you guys, but I make YouTube videos. Sometimes I really want a good thumbnail. And yeah, you can screenshot stuff, but I feel like if Blizzard actually did try, they could build so many features and filters and things into being able to take pictures in WoW at any given point in time from really cool vantage points with an actual built-in camera, which I think would be super awesome. So I'm really hoping that that eventually becomes a thing in World of Warcraft, being able to use the camera everywhere and anywhere. going wide means you might end up with your MMO being a 1P shooter. Maybe, but I doubt it, because you can also, like, obviously if you go too far, yes, you're correct, but you can control it, right? Much more easily than what you control vertical building, right? Because vertical building, you don't realize that it's a mess until it's a mess. Whereas horizontal building, you'll start to realize that, okay, there's too much shit going on here. It's getting harder and harder for us to actually control where we're going with this. So yeah.
It's a collaborative effort, you know. And we take risks sometimes, you know, like dragon riding was one of those. It was, you know,
and it's fantastic.
Right.
It is fantastic.
Those are those magical things that you can't predict, you know, what's really going to, you know, take hold with the community. And that's sort of part of the process we have to take care with. I
have taken, throughout my entire playthrough of Dragonflight, I have only used my Hearthstone once now, and that was after, well, now almost a month. It was last week that I used my Hearthstone for the first time. And the only reason I used my Hearthstone was I was in a dungeon, and I didn't want to run out of the dungeon in order to get to the outside. And it was I didn't want to wait a minute either. Plus, I had a quest at Valdrakken that I wanted to do. So I thought, nah, fuck it. I'll just go back to Valdrakken and go to the quest there. So I Hearthstoned. Otherwise, I don't use my Hearthstone. I fly everywhere because I do actually enjoy it, because I keep doing cool shit. And I know it's only entertaining for me. No one else gives a shit. But I will fly as high as I can, and then I'll shoot down, and I'll try to fly through the trees and just do crap like that. Which, yeah, sure. Some people will just go, bro, just fly there and get it over and done with. I like to make it look cool. It's fun. It's like a kind of mini game with the game, which I think is really awesome. Arkil, how you doing, bro? Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
We're not making WoW is not a treadmill. Mm-hmm. It's not a, you know, the recipe changes every single time we do it. So our job is to just make sure, like, just help them. Our job really is to just give them everything they need to make the magic they want to make, and, you know, give it some guardrails just to support them.
Yeah.
But it is a mammoth effort.
Yeah, I mean, our process, you know, is we try to, you know, fully support the creatives in their vision for what the game can be and should be. You know, you're talking about Dragon Isles. Well, first off, just even deciding where to go to the Dragon Isles. A lot of blue sky. We could go here. We could go there. We could, you know, promote these characters or those, and kind of narrowing down, you know, after a number of weeks, okay, this is really feeling like it will gel. And we've always kind of wanted to go to Dragon Isles. We thought, oh, that's high fantasy. That'll be great to, you know, return to that.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to be a dragon? And it's funny because you'll see those notes show up, you know, in forums and in player posts where it's like, you could do a dragon race, blah, 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 blah. and
high elves. It's very important.
But there's high elves out there too. You know, but we kind of came this whole laundry list of things that we'd like to see, you know, as a team. And then I remember the process we went through is, okay, everybody gets like 5 votes. And vote for the thing you want. You can put 5 votes on one thing if you really want to make it happen.
Oh, that's an interesting process.
Yeah.
How many people involved in that? So,
it gets vast.
It was all the dev leads, and then, you know, it was influenced by the greater team.
So it's almost like a bingo thing then.
But it wasn't just a highest votes win. That was information that Ian and the design team was taking as, okay, well, if this is what our own team thinks would be cool, how does that jive with what we're seeing, you know, from community? So we try to be careful. We will run surveys, but we don't want to telegraph too much and kind of spoil, you know, what we're up to. But then that eventually bubbled into, here's features we want to do. And we try our darndest to, like, okay, how can we make this happen? How can we put enough resources behind it? You know, how can we have the right people doing things at the right time to get as much into the expansion as possible?
John and Holly there, the 2 people behind the scenes you don't get to meet very often, who are responsible for even getting a WoW expansion out to us. There is going to be a theme throughout this video, and that is throwing out the old playbook. Many of the people you're going to meet started years and years ago when there were rules in place about what should exist in an MMO. And in Era 3, a lot of that is going away. By now,
I feel like that's not just true for WoW. Gaming has had these are the rules for a good game. And they've existed for basically as long as gaming has been around. But more and more now, we do see games coming to market that technically do not play by those rules. A good example of this would be the Souls games, right? By every metric, games like Souls games should not do well. Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Sekiro, all of those games, they should not do well. Because based on the rules, you should have a difficulty slider in your video game, because not everyone is going to be as good as everyone else. So it's important that you have difficulty sliders in your game so that everyone can play it, or at least as many people as possible. The game should have, if it's going to have a story, it should have a story that's presentable, easy to follow, easy to acquire, and open worlds, at least if you look at most games, because most of these rules aren't hard and fast. Most of these rules are usually by design. So people just design in that way, and that is why it happens. And if you look at most open world games, of which Ubisoft is actually, they used to be one of the leaders in open world games, the idea is that you have this massive open world where sort of the same activities take place every single, all over the map, and then there's a story that plays through that. Elden Ring comes along, and it throws all of that out the window. It says, no, fuck you, with your random ass events that happen that's basically the same event happening 5 million times in the game. We're not going to have that. And screw you with your difficulty slider. We're not going to have that. There are difficulty sliders in the game, but they're based on gameplay. So there are items and things that you will find in the game that will make certain bosses a hell of a lot easier if you have those items. And sure, you could go ahead and you could go kill one boss that will drop an item that's going to make another boss a hell of a lot easier. It's up to you. Or you could just try to play the really difficult boss and just keep going until you get it down. Because the game isn't actually difficult, the game just requires a little bit of getting used to, and that's really the point. It changes everything and it smashes through it. And there's so many other games now that you can look on the market at. I think one of the genres that's gone through probably the most iterations would be the RTS genre, where, it used to be a very common Age of Empires, Warcraft, even, Command and Conquer had that was the blueprint. That's how you design your game. And more often now, we see companies just throwing all that out and saying, well, no, we don't have to do it that way. We can go this way, right? And we can do this. Dawn of War would be another example of, that was sort of that was the hard and fast rule. If you made an RTS, that is how you make an RTS. And I think as gaming has become more and more mainstream, as you now have larger and larger audiences sort of engaging with video games, you have a lot more freedom now in making a video game than what you ever had in the past. And I think it's good that Blizzard has finally realized MMOs don't just have to be raiding, dungeons, and PvP. There's so much more to MMOs than raiding, dungeons, and PvP. And it's okay to cater to people that don't care about raiding, dungeons, and PvP.
Most of you have played Dragonflight. You are now experiencing the changes that we talked about in the first video. However, those changes started over 2 years ago. How did it happen? Who decided it? When was the decision made from concept to what we actually have now today? And more importantly, who did it? That's what we're going to be finding out about today. Let's start this journey by looking at the brand new talent system. Where did it come from? When was the decision made? Well, who better to talk to than the people who actually made the new talent system? We're going to sit down with Brian Holinka, lead combat designer of World of Warcraft. Brian is not just the PvP guy, something we chatted about while we were there. Brian is in charge of all the combat in WoW, and WoW's combat is what it's known for. He joined the company the week Mr. Pandari released. Ironically, when the talent system was removed. So he has a lot to say about this. Along with him, we're going to sit down with one of the big brains and senior game designer, Graham Berger. He was one of the big brains behind Evoker. A lot of you have seen it, a lot of new spells, a lot of new interesting things, and his team are the ones who put all these new talent systems together and what it holds for us in the future in line with Blizzard's new philosophy. How do you guys feel about the min-max lifestyle? Because you guys, we'll get to the talent trees in a sec, but it launched yesterday, and already every post is out there is like, not sure what to do, copy and paste this link, and in it goes. And for a lot of people, they will go, okay. And that's it. They'll just bypass the whole system. So, you know, with all this work you guys put into it, I mean, I assume you predicted this was going to happen.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're in a world, right, where we have, you know, very popular influencers playing the game, sharing their knowledge.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it.
But, you know, people sharing their information and about the game, their knowledge of the game. And, you know, modern games are about communities, right? They're about online communities, and people want to, you know, talk about these things, right? Talk about these choices. And it's also an opportunity for somebody to buck the trend and be like, well, actually, you know, everybody's playing this way, and I've tried it that way, and oh, wow. You know,
This is actually, like, he's making a good point. I don't know how many of you, I don't know how many of you started playing all the way back in Classic. In TBC, Warriors were in a terrible spot. Terrible spot. Also, we had talent trees, right? And you had your cookie cutters. They existed. Everyone knew how to play. Warriors were tanks. Even though they had multiple specs that they could play, if you were a warrior, you were a tank. Why? You did 0 damage. 0. There was no damage for warriors. No matter what people tried, no matter what cookie cutter you followed, there was no damage for a warrior. I'm pretty sure this was in TBC, because it got a little bit more hard to find in Wrath of the Lich King. Until one day, and I wish I could remember who this guy was, but a guy came up with a warrior build that no one had spoken about. No one followed it. No one knew that you could build a warrior this way. The guy stacked armor penetration on his warrior. And suddenly, warrior was top DPS. It was destroying shit with a full armor pen build. This is the beauty of having talent trees. Yes, the vast majority of the community is just going to cookie cutter. That's just the nature of the game. But ever so often, you'll find one person that discovers a trick with a talent tree that no one else fucking knows about. And that is the one that just pops off, and now suddenly everyone's doing it because no one actually thought about it. So it is beautiful. Snubby, by the way, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Welcome to the stream, bro.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And I've been watching the PvP scene for a long time, and that will happen in the tournaments a lot of times, you know, where someone will try something different and it'll be surprising, right? And I think that'll happen with these talent trees, where there will be situations where people say on this fight, really actually play this build and it works out better. And those are the things I think we want. But there's going to be a system, like a group of players who are just like, I've set my talent tree, I'm walking away from it. Like, that's what we expect.
I found that a lot with my guides, because I did guides for like 7 years for WoW. And what I discovered is that so many of my viewers, they just get the build on day one and they never respec.
Right.
And it made me so sad. It's like, but your class plays in all sorts of fresh and interesting ways. You know, even if it's swapping Mass Entangle to Typhoon or whatever it is for Mythic Plus, like, that's cool. You've changed what you're doing and doing stuff. And then finding out, I mean, if you got, statistically, do you find that? Is a lot of people just like, and I'm done, and then move on. I mean, I think Ian said he thought that a lot of people found talent choices a hassle in terms of they want to collect pets and things. They're not interested in the combat style whatsoever. You've done pre-made talents, right?
Yep, like we did the starter builds, which I've seen the reaction to that has been really positive.
Oh, uploaded.
You know, a lot of people are like, thank goodness for the starter build, right? And all my buttons were still there. So that's gone over really well, surprisingly well. It's one of those, you know, features. I think we were talking about it, you know, while we were developing it, and we were like, yeah, we should do this. And then you're like, it's hit the live, you know, game, and we're like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, for those players who are not interested, it's like, I'm done. Like, although you didn't give Prot Warriors spell reflect.
On default.
I was furious. I did because we were just testing the new dungeon out. I was like, oh, I'll just go with the standard build and see what's it. My fingers were doing it.
right.
And the button and it wasn't
Keyboard,
there.
My fingers like, this is spell reflex. Go.
Yeah.
This is not working.
And that'll evolve over time. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah.
more times we hear stories like that, we'll take that back and we can make adjustments to it. But
I'm not requesting it. Last time I did that, DK's got nerfed. Like, I must say.
Oh, the feedback's been noted and it's already on its way. Sorry, yeah.
Emails going.
I think, but with adding more choice to the system, I think we've just gone from an era basically from Mists of Pandaria to now, where the classes were heavily curated, right? Like you were making 7 choices, 7 talent rows. That was it. Those were your choices. Everything else, like we handed to you, made it very easy on ourselves to be easy to balance the
Relative
game.
for Blizzard.
And now we've put more hands, and we've really empowered players to do these things. And yeah, there's a downside to that it's harder to balance, and sure, more meta builds will emerge. But I think that freedom to like be empowered to like really define your character, it's worth something. Like it's worth a lot.
I play a completely different build in Mythic Plus than what any of the websites say I should play. And I'm consistently doing well. Well, I say Mythic Plus. I don't think I've done a single Mythic Plus. Mythic dungeons. Because I'm still looking for a couple of pieces. Plus, Mythic Plus is a hassle. But I'm consistently doing like very good DPS, both single target and AoE, Affliction Warlock. First of all, you shouldn't be an Affliction Warlock, apparently, when you're doing Mythic. But then also, the build that they want you to follow, I just don't like the playstyle. I fucking hate the playstyle. It feels very limiting in what I want to be able to do with my Warlock. And so I went with a completely different build. I went with the build that I thought, yeah, this hits all of the notes that I want with my character, and I'm happy with it, because I'm not going to push World First Mythic Plus or anything like that. I just want to have fun, and this is the one that makes the most fun for me. And I think even if you don't do that, just the fact that you do get to choose your talents is a massive immersive experience, because that's what RPGs are all about. It's about building your class either through gear or through talents or through both. But having that freedom to choose how you want to play the game is fundamentally important.
And, even if I go back, just the leveling experience, I think we all have a lot of high-end max-level players. But if you go through the leveling experience and now you're getting a talent point versus just getting a spell, like it's a pretty fundamental difference that you really feel.
And people just like getting a little bit of progress that way, right? There's something more momentous about the level number going up than getting anything. And that's when we were looking into both your histories, which are like extensive. You joined during Mr. Pandaria.
Yeah.
Just as talent trees were removed.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, for you, did you join and go, what? Because both of you strike me as so into player customization. I think that's come through already. It's like reading through your backstory, your work history. It's like you two seem very focused that player choice is everything, which was kind of the opposite in Shadowlands. My fight with Ian was like, you're taking away player choice. Why are you doing that? And I'm wondering, it was like for you specifically, was this something you came in and were like, no, let's not go this way for a while, and now it's coming back with the talent tree choices? It's like,
no, I mean, certainly when I joined, I was just, when I joined in Miss Pandaria, I was like, oh, Blizzard, I was a young designer, and like, okay, yeah, this all makes sense, like only meaningful choices. That was what we went. And I think that made sense at the time, right? Because the game was getting kind of, the game was on its like 5th expansion or whatever. It just felt like they kept building more and more and more on top and it was getting complicated, and they felt like,
they should
let's
bring
just
back
make these
glyphs,
classes
bro.
straightforward. Let's make
They should bring back
choices
glyphs.
meaningful.
Glyphs
I mean,
was
some people
super
don't
fun.
remember that those initial talent rows, they were class wide.
Yes.
So it wasn't that, like, it was very interesting, because when I first arrived here, it was literally the release week of Mr. Pandaria is when I started. And there was meeting every week for like the first couple of months was just about talents and talent balance, and like trying to make these talent rows work for the different classes. So if I was beating any drum at that time, it was like, oh, we should make these things spec specific, right?
Yeah.
Which we eventually did, because I felt like we had certain situations we just needed to accommodate. But no, initially I was like, okay, this is what Blizzard is doing, and I'm here to learn. But I think coming out of Shadowlands, I think with the release of Classic and us all playing Classic again, leveling, you know, going through like earning spell ranks, getting talent points, that's kind of what kind of triggered us to say, you know, it's really kind of more fun to get a talent point than it is to just kind of get a
I remember that. Do you guys remember when fucking what was it called when they freeze themselves? Ice block would just last for fucking ever. Like, holy shit.
rank upgrade. And then thinking just, hey, we've had this talent system for a long time. We really need to kind of flip the table in a way and really shake things up for players. Because if you've been playing your class since Mists of Pandaria, you know, if we aren't changing all of the talents every expansion, it feels pretty similar.
There's something so special about a new expansion, or was, unfortunately, but now should be coming back, is that every new expansion, you were looking forward to what your new talent was. Because I still remember when Bladestorm came into the game.
Right.
It was a bit before your time, I suppose, but that was a hell of a day. It's like, you turn into a blade of death and spin and crunch. I can't wait. And every warrior, I think, that day was 3ing an arena, all Bladestorming one person to see what would happen. Yeah. And then for a while that was lost. And we actually went the opposite ways. Like, you lost a lot of stuff. You know, you came out of Legion into BFA and it was like, where's all my toys gone? You know,
yeah.
It's like,
Warrior with a crossbow.
And is that something that when the talent trees decided to come back, you're like, we can't keep going this way? And Classic would have had an influence on that. This is just fun.
Yeah, I think when we added this system, we certainly weren't like, let's add the talent trees for this expansion and then we'll figure it out later. Like, we want, if we're going to make this system, we want to grow for, you know, this is our system going forward and we can add more talent points every time we level up, right? We want to add 10 talent points the expansion after this one. We want to add new abilities. And I think players like the class specific stuff a lot, you know, and so that's kind of part of it and that's kind of where we're looking forward. But it's funny because having the 2 trees is actually really helpful too. Because
it's a tough choice sometimes. I've spent a good 10-15 minutes looking at one talent point. Where's it going to go? Oh, yeah. Where's it going to go? And it's something I really hope people embrace. But you're right. What was that decision made early? It's like, okay, there's some foundational stuff that CC utility.
Yeah.
And then let's just make a tree of fun stuff that tails you damage.
We tried a lot of different things when we first started kind of working on the talent project. Again, we had a talent summit with the combat.
When did the word come down? We're swapping back. We're going back.
Let's see, I think...
You remember better than I would.
Yeah, about like shortly after Shadowlands launch, you know.
So that early, so a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Because we start thinking about the next expansion shortly after launching.
Ian said, like, the next one's doing
and so pretty much after that, and we go ahead. I think you could hear the story of the Talent Summit, right?
We had like a 2 or 3 day kind of summit where the whole combat team and some other designers got together and we said, okay, you can make any talent system you want. Like, no restrictions, don't worry about tech, just what would you do? And we came up with some really wild stuff, which was really cool. And then obviously kind of went, okay, what's reasonable to do? What fits? What kind of hits all of the goals we've laid out, not just 1 or 2 of them? But yeah, tried some wild stuff.
Did somebody go full Path of Exile? It's like, okay, I picture.
We might have had 1 or 2 very large grids with lots of connections. But then the idea of having class abilities and specialization abilities separated, we realized gave us a lot of...
I actually think that was the best decision they made, was to have class-specific talents and then your spec-specific talents. Because in the class-specific talents, there's actually some really cool fucking talents. Even some damage talents. Rurikon, how you doing, bro? Thank you very much, dude. Really appreciate that. There's some cool shit there. Like, as a warlock, there's things that really lower the amount of damage that I do, as well as increases the amount of healing that I do. I've been able to keep myself alive in some of my mythic runs just because I'm spec'd into increased healing from my Drain Life ability that, according to the cookie cutters, I should not have because it's useless. It's not increasing my damage, actually. But for me, perfect. I want that. It works for me. So... yeah, I love the talent trees. Rurikon, you'll probably know the talent trees a lot better because you actually do like Mythic Plus and stuff. Yeah, it's my birthday today.
Power to sort of define the types of choices players are making. I think for me, from conduits and soulbinds, having those finesse nodes where it was, you're making utility choice here, and that's it. You don't have to worry about how much damage it gives you or what throughput, just like, what's the cool kind of trick you want your character to be able to do? Seeing that, oh, if we do the class side and have it be mostly utility choices and kind of with the gates, really empowers players to make those choices and not feel like they're giving up throughput, which I think is really, really important and a huge advantage of the system we came up with eventually.
No, for sure. Like it's come out really well, and it's got to be much easier now to balance. I assume. I got to assume Shadowlands was a headache. I mean, you got it really close actually. Like towards the end, it was really, really close, but it must have been a headache to start with. It felt like it.
It was a lot. I mean, I think every expansion is, though, in different ways. But, you know, because we're making class updates for the expansion, and then whatever system we're layering on top, be it soulbinds and conduits or talents, it's just a lot of new. So
yeah, I'm not saying that the combinatorics are any less, right?
Yeah.
With the talent trees, like, well, a lot of the things we put in the talent trees we took from the conduits or the legendaries or the set bonuses or previous artifact abilities. Like we often talked about it being like a greatest hits type of talent tree. And so I don't think it's gotten easier for us. I think that there's still the challenge exists, but there's a lot more choice in the player's hands if we're, you know, off on something, right?
The way I looked at it, maybe I'm way off base, but I'm reading from what I see, is that you kind of kept it so you could rebuild your Shadowlands character for the most part. And I think for the average player, that's a really nice thing. So you've got the separate loadouts, but if you just overhauled it as like...
Mr. Demuria, I don't have a PO box yet. I'm waiting for one to open up, but I am on the wait list for it. What new Nazoth theory, Benj Booby?
Like, hey, this Frost Mage now does all these wacky things that you've never seen before. The average player is going to be like,
Right.
I don't know what this is.
Yes.
So it feels like this is almost like a gentle swap.
Yeah.
It's a whole new system.
Yeah.
But you can basically just rebuild what you already have, and you should understand if you're a Death Knight, you know what Death Coil does, you know what it's going to do, and you know generally, there are some new talents in there, obviously, but most of the part is going to be the same. Do you feel like once this settles, next expansion, we can get a little silly maybe?
Yeah, I think managing disruption to players as they return is important, right? Everybody logged in yesterday, or and it was kind of like, do we want everybody to log in and be like, I don't know how to play my class, I'm logging off, farewell, right? We want people to log in and be like, oh, this is still my class, and now let me open the talent tree and maybe I can change things. Like, that's what we wanted. That was important. So you're absolutely right. But at the same time, we wanted them to then be able to unclick and say, I'm going to do something crazy.
The return of the talent system is just one of two blasts from the past. The other is, of course, flying. While I was at Blizzard, the game hadn't released yet, but from what I can tell, now it's out, is Dragonflying has been received extremely positively. Now, not that long ago, I made a video about the top 5 regrets Blizzard probably had with World of Warcraft. And number 1 on that list was flying. They haven't embraced it for a really long time, and I kind of thought that the fact that flying was the big feature of Dragonflight was the statement in and of itself of this return to their previous ideas. But I know one thing you guys don't regret, and that's picking up a Displate. Displate proudly sponsored our trip across the ocean so we could sit down with Blizzard and have these discussions.
If you want to pick up a Displate, you can use our code down below for up to 33% off.
They are wonderful pieces of art from not just games, but a variety of movies and any other fandom you might find. They're so easy to put up. They leave absolutely no marks on your walls if you're not allowed to actually put pictures up on walls. Displates are going to be perfect for you. So check them out at the link below. So let's get into the dragon riding with Ian Hazakostas, the games director. And then
I disagree with you fundamentally, Blasphemous Crow, but this is why games are great. And this is why I think Dragonflight is great. Different people will like different things, and there's something for everyone in there. Because I actually think dragon riding was underhyped. I don't think enough people made a big enough deal of dragon riding. I love dragon riding. I cannot get enough of it. I literally told the stream just earlier, I've only used my Hearthstone once because I like flying everywhere. It's super fun to just dive down and sort of go through trees and try to make it look as cool as possible as I go over the mountain or through like mountain peaks and stuff. And then another thing that I've just found, or just unlocked, is all throughout Dragonflight, all throughout the world, there's these high peaks that you can land on, and then you claim it, sort of like an Assassin's Creed-esque kind of, you claim it and then it sort of circles around your character and shows you the whole area. And that's kind of fun. Like, I'll fly and then suddenly in my minimap I'll see this peak pop up, and then you need to try and get on the peak, and it's not always easy to get on the peak because the peak can sometimes have like a very small area that you can land on, so you're circling around trying to slow yourself down so you can actually land on this. I find it to be super cool. I bought a display for my dad using Breach Code during Christmas. Nice, Rurikon. What did you get him?
Follow up with Morgan Day, the Associate Game Director, and Tina Wang, the Associate Art Director, to see how Dragonflying shapes the world of a new expansion and whether the re-inclusion of flying from the start was a sign of change within Blizzard.
Like, let's solve problems today. Our players are hurting, our players aren't happy. How can we help today? Let's make a bunch of changes. Let's actually re-examine everything they've asked for that we've said no to, and like double check, triple check that we believe we're doing the right thing here. And in some cases, that was like...
So, Mr. Demuria, just to be clear, I do think that Blizzard's current balance for gathering is a problem. Because I hear it quite often from gatherers. They're running out of vigor quite easily. So Blizzard probably needs to sort of scale up the amount of vigor that you get from gathering a node. That I can agree with. Although I will say, if you're just flying somewhere without gathering, if you're running out of vigor, flying from one side of the map to the other side of the map, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. But gonna be super honest, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you're running out of vigor just flying from one side of the map to the other. I do it easily. I'm constantly capped at 6 vigor, no matter how fast I try to fly, no matter what I try to do, because you get to a point where you're gaining vigor so quick that you've used 1, you gain 1. You use 1, you gain 1. You use 3, you gain 1. It's nuts just how quickly you get vigor. So I don't know why people who don't gather complain about dragon riding and the vigor being a problem.
Like turning over old stones of design philosophy that had been kind of taken for granted for 15 plus years. That, you know, the things we were always trained by our predecessors about, you know, what should or shouldn't be account wide, and the importance of investment in your character, and the importance of, you know, this or that. And asking like, okay, maybe those things were right for the game 15 years ago, but they're not making players happy today. And so do they still hold? Should we still apply them? And I think that began a process of, you know, letting players play the game the way they want. And I think, you know, what we were hearing loud and clear from folks was, look, there's this part of your game that I love. I would happily spend all the time in the world doing this thing, but if you make me do this other thing that I really don't like in order to do the thing I like, I'm going to do neither of them. Yep. And I'm just going to leave. And you know, we as stubbornly as at times we were trying to stick to, we want, you know, all of this integration, and you shouldn't be able to just raid log, and you shouldn't be able to just, you know, do one thing, or we're not really a massively multiplayer world anymore. We're just, you know, a group of sandboxes. If we're not making our players happy, then what's the point of any of it?
Yeah, I would actually put that down to something I brought up a lot. Is it felt like you guys were prideful, very prideful, and to a stubbornness on certain things. And I think we can look at flying as the prime example of this, because at one point I did a video which was the things I think Blizzard really regrets doing that have led to consequences later on. And number 1 on that list was flying, because the Burning Crusade, flying came in to solve a problem that solved itself in the Burning Crusade, because vanilla is just a hodgepodge of stuff, people hiding in boxes and crayons around the world, and the zones are all over the place, and Azeroth is designed in a really horrible way geographically for traversing it. And then the Burning Crusade comes out, and it's basically a circle, and the flight points are fine, so flying not particularly necessary. But in Wrath of the Lich King, it was embraced again.
Yeah.
And then after that, it kind of became like the bastard child of the family. Like, did this take something away from the game? Which it did. And I think that's absolutely true. It kind of falls in that category for me as transmog. Transmog does take something from the game in that you see those people in those bright armors and you finish that set. But it's so overwhelmingly,
Yes.
it makes so many
Yes.
people happy that
Yes.
it's not an issue. And it kind of, when I saw the title, and it was getting leaked and things like that, but I was like, if it really is that, this actually is a statement, and it felt like a statement. It's like, one of the things we're going to do, again, because we haven't done it since... What?
Mists, if you want to talk about being able to fly at launch in some
It would
form.
be Miss, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, Wrath was last time you embraced.
Yeah, WoD was the infamous no flying until
Which was such a
Pathfinder was
shame.
added.
Yeah, shit. I remember that people were so angry, bro, that you couldn't fly in WoD. Oh shit, clean. Thank you so much. 12 months, part of the Degeneration. Appreciate ya. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I was on
In
board with you.
622.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the way Garrisons went, like, if you could show people it was good to be on the ground, but it didn't work out, and then you had to relent. I actually felt really bad that day. It's like, almost. But now this is the feature of the game. It's like, it's here, it's big, it's impressive, and it's easily the most fun thing I've done in Dragonflight so far is the races, and especially the group races. There's a tension there. I haven't felt that for a long time with something that wasn't in 2% of the raid boss health left. Am I winning? Is he coming behind me? Has he got his boost left? And I'm just, I feel more like, is this, like, again, that change of philosophy you're talking about last 15 years? It's like, why are we treating flying like this? It's really fun. And in fact, going to Ulduar for the first time is magical. Crossing the Ice Crown Gate is magical when you could finally do it. And I was like, now it's become this ridiculous achievement thing, which makes no sense still. I'm going to hope it's that.
Well, wait, the Pathfinder we're largely, I mean, I think we've largely backed away from in past expansions. You don't,
Oh, it's horrible. But yeah, is this part of the statement with Dragonflight? Or it's Dragonflight. I imagine you already know the next expansion, and so it's like, no, we were going that way. But it feels like a statement.
I mean, well, our future expansions won't all have flight in the name.
That can be an esport that I would watch. Fucking flying racing. That would actually be cool to watch. Like, just a bunch of people flying around. That would be cool to watch.
But, like, but yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I think in terms of coming up with a name, we obviously knew what the features were, knew what the setting was, and it felt like there's a couple different names, right? The dragon flights are a thing.
Yes.
There is flight.
Given the philosophical change, it felt very coincidental, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, the vibe of the expansion as a whole is definitely meant to be a breath of fresh air. It's a return to Azeroth, wide open exploration. It's, a fraction of the feeling you might get playing a game like Breath of the Wild and looking out over, rolling plains and feeling like that land is yours to explore.
The sense of speed is fantastic.
Which is, that's fantastic to hear.
Right.
So I think that's one of those things that we knew from just the feel was going to be essential to that feature. Mm-hmm. All the other systems, the progression, everything else we could build into it. None of that would matter if your first 5 seconds didn't make you say, "This is awesome."
Yep.
If it felt clunky, if it felt just off in some way, we were going to lose people right there.
But coming into the zones, how did you come back to reinventing a world where flying was now a part? Because we haven't seen it since Wrath of the Lich King, right? Where flying was truly embraced as a welcome member of the community. And then you go into the Dragon Isles, and you have so much fun with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just looked for the highest place I could possibly find, just to hurl. How far can I go?
Right.
I went to the sword. Can I make it to Orgrimmar from the sword? But was that so freeing to actually be like, okay, we don't need to care that one day they'll get Pathfinder?
Yeah, so there's a mix there. So with Dragonflight, it just from the beginning, it's like, can we really make an expansion about dragons where you don't fly, and that's not like a fundamental part of your experience? So, and that in itself kind of led to us thinking about flying as a system and how we can create, this new dragon riding version of it that allows you to engage with the world in a different way. As you said, finding the tallest peaks. Mm-hmm. Because with our old system, it's really just, as it's swimming in air, so you navigate in every which way, and you don't really need to engage with an environment in a way where you're perceiving what's around you, right? Like for the human experience of discovering, of RPGs, when you walk up a mountain and you discover something special, there's something meaningful to that versus just, pointing yourself generally and hitting auto run and that's it. And so
so obviously they explained that normal flying will be coming to the Dragon Flight zones. So you don't have to worry about that. It is coming to the Dragon Isles, but at launch, I understand this. They want the new feature to really play out. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Most people choose the path of least resistance, all right? So if you had normal flying right off the bat next to dragon riding, a lot of players would be like, fuck it, right? I don't want this, I don't understand it, screw it, let me just go with normal flying. Because, you know, that's what I know. It's much easier. So a lot of people wouldn't even engage with the new dragon riding system. I can tell you one thing, though, as someone that just recently went back to the old world because I had a quest that I had to go hand in after the time walking event. Normal flying sucks dick and balls. And I mean hobo dick and balls. It is a smelly, dirty, infested fucking dick, bro. It is just miserable. Like, it's so slow. Nothing happens. It's so boring. You're just sort of there and just nothing's going on. It's miserable. So this is brilliant. I will never go back to normal flying in my life. Like, dragon riding is just a hell of a lot better than anything normal flying could ever offer. And I would be okay with them just removing normal flying from the game and just adding dragon riding. And obviously scaling it to the point where gatherers can actually gather without running out of vigor. Because I think that's the only people that I ever hear complain about dragon riding are people that's trying to gather. Because I can understand why that would be just so horrible for players. You know, when you gather, you want to gather quick. And constantly when you're gathering, you have to stand on the ground and gain vigor so that you can actually go somewhere. So I do think Blizzard should do some work at trying to fix that. But for everyone else, I think dragon riding is just far superior to anything normal flying can offer. Death Knight, how you doing, bro? Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, bro. I feel like restoring vigor isn't hard. No, Rosefolk, at least not if you're not gathering. I don't have a gathering profession. I have tailoring and enchanting. So I'll find out what it's like when I finally level my warrior and my paladin and my druid, because they're obviously, I'm gonna learn. But yeah, it all depends, right?
We're excited, like the potential that...
Go to the toilet.
That's true. There is that aspect of it. And so the dragon riding does allow you to truly, the player to engage with the environment in that way, make, strategic choices, right? Making choices of where you walk, where you go, where you fly. That in itself is part of gameplay and makes the experience more engaging.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like, that's one of the things that's been really exciting for us on, while you're leveling up. And you mentioned Wrath of Lich King was the last time we had flying there.
Yeah.
Like, BC flying is just, it's so much less engaging than dragon riding. Like, when you walk into a point of interest like a POI in any one of our zones in Dragonflight, the way you interact with that, like, has added a lot of depth, or dragon riding rather, has added a lot of depth there. And, now it's like, okay, well, how do I want to swoop in, like you said, like, where's the largest peak where I can jump into and then find a way to fly into the POI and hopefully not get too much aggro where I land, right? Like, it's actually really added a lot of gameplay elements.
Getting too much aggro when I land? Hell no. Whenever I land, I try to land in the middle of as many things as possible because you do damage and stun everything. Like, it's just awesome landing and just seeing everything sort of walking around being like, what the fuck just happened here?
It's there, which has been really, really cool and an opportunity that a lot of our designers have really fully embraced. And on the level design side as well, with the art and level design work very closely together, they they were very intentionally looking for, okay, how do we make very high peaks here that are accessible? And even a lot of the quest designers, where in previous expansions you might have done a quest that was kind of way off in the corner of the zone. They might have.
Boise, I would actually say the way to solve this is so easy. It's actually laughable. So Blizzard overhauled all of the professions except, of course, for gathering professions, really. And I don't mean that there aren't more depth to gathering professions. I mean that it's still the same thing. You click the node, you mine the node. It's all automatic, right? It's like fishing. You throw in your fishing line and you click and you get whatever the fuck is out there. The way you fix that is by adding some kind of mini game to mining a node. Very similar to how Final Fantasy does it, where Professions is actually a mini game. So creating something isn't as easy as just click create and it does it automatically. There's actual rotations that have to go on in order to ensure that you get as much as possible, or that you craft something at as high a level as possible. Now imagine if you could do the same thing with mining. Imagine if you added just a small little mini game to mining that allows, you have to click the button at exactly the right time, get into sort of a rhythm, add an oil to the node that allows you to mine the node but not destroy as much of the resource within it. And then the better you do it, the more you get out of a node. So the way you do it is, if someone literally just clicks the node and starts mining it, they get, say, 2 ore from the node. But if you do it perfectly, so if you add the oil at the right time and maybe add a little bit of water at the right time, and all of these are just buttons that you press. So it's not like, go into your bags and find the oil and throw it on. It's just a button that you press that adds water, and it's automatic. You don't have to collect a resource in order to do it. It's just a resource that you sort of have, right? You click it at the right times and you get, instead of 2, you get 20. So if you do it perfectly, you get 20 resources out of a single node rather than just 2. So this means that you're spending maybe 10 seconds or 5 seconds at a node, which means that by the time you remount, you've already got your 3 vigor back, rather than, mount up and you haven't even gotten a single vigor back yet. I think that would probably solve a lot of the issues. So you keep it possible for people to just, you make it possible for people to make a fundamental choice, quantity or quality. So in other words, fuck it, I don't want to go through the mini game, so I'm going to play the quantity game here. I'm just going to visit as many nodes as humanly possible in my mining sector, right? So instead of, getting 20 resources at a single node, I'll get 20 resources at 10 nodes, and it's fine because they'll respawn and I'll just keep doing that. But then for those people that go, nah, screw it, I'll just get all the resources from every node. Yeah, they take a little bit more time, but they do get a shit ton of stuff. And so it's pretty decent, and also makes gathering a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, rather than just click and go. Click and go, click and go. I want the same sort of thing for crafting eventually, where in order to craft something, it's not just a case of clicking create. Because that's all fun and games, and that's all cool, but that's not really what RPGs are about. If you're going to craft something... I remember, for example, the very first time I played Skyrim. Skyrim was my first Elder Scrolls game, and I got to a chest that needed to be lockpicked. Now, I was very much aware of lockpicking, right? I played Baldur's Gate and all those games, and when you lockpick something, it does it. So I click on this chest to lockpick it, and suddenly I have to lockpick. It's not being done for me. I have to do it. And it's actually super cool. Because, I am lockpicking this, right? I am lockpicking it, and if I'm good, I'm going to get into this goddamn chest. And there's different difficulty settings, and it sort of keeps you on your toes. That's cool. It's cool to give people things to do when they're doing stuff, rather than just having it happen automatically. Now, I'm not saying Blizzard should do it immediately, and obviously test the community, because this is my opinion. The whole community might be like, fuck that, bro. I don't want it. And if that's the case, then I'll step back. I'm happy to say I don't have all the answers, but I do think that could be a cool way of solving a lot of the issues.
I've been an NPC who very politely opened a portal for you or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nowadays, it was just like, well, let's just make sure the turn-in is like at the top of a big hill and we're good.
Mm-hmm.
With Dragonflight rather. So that's been really awesome to see.
That macro design of the continent too, if you notice, it's sort of this like spiral upwards with Valdrakken, your capital city, being at the peaks. And we're just thinking that, players are going to set their Hearthstone there, and they'll be able to drag and ride down to all of the activities to do outdoor content.
Yeah, I think I remember being frustrated on the first build, because you had to go to an NPC to port you up to get up there, and he was like kind of just out of the way, or he's at the back of the room or something.
Right.
I was like, no, because I just want to get up, and because I pictured what you had in mind artistically is when it's populated with the players, this will look like a dragon area, right? It'll look like the dragon areas we've seen in a variety of games, like Dark Souls 2 when you go to Dragon Peak. There's dragons hanging, almost like Gothic statues in a city from each of the buildings, right? And then you'll go to the top of Valdrakken, and there should be dragons hanging ready to just leap off the sides. And one of the things I was looking forward to when it hit live servers is like, that is what's going to be here. And there'll be a variety of colors, there'll be different shapes, sizes, that kind of thing ready to go. But I have to say, the most fun we had with it, I don't know how you did it, was the sense of speed.
You mentioned the speed of things, which that's an interesting aspect of how we approach our zone design. Something that surprised me when we were doing a survey of zones at some point was looking at some vanilla zones, and Westfall is 9 world chunks. That's kind of a unit of measurement that we have for zones. There's these, chunks basically. And with that being only 9, I was so surprised because it's actually, it's fairly small. And I remember, questing through that experience, it felt like such an expansive space. I was there for such a long time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And then Eastern Plaguelands is something like about 40 world chunks.
That feels 40.
And that's true. But then also there's that contrast of when you were in Westfall, you didn't have a mount, whereas in Eastern Plaguelands you did.
Maybe for you.
And and in the Dragon Isles itself is actually the biggest continent that we've ever created, because we wanted to create this land that was worthy of dragons.
And dense too, right?
Yeah. But there's still these wilderness spaces, right, that make it feel natural, this sense that not everything is just like a theme park experience.
I will say, and I've said this, so I'm glad that she's actually saying it, the world of Dragonflight is probably the best world Blizzard has ever created, because it feels like an actual world. If you were to close your eyes and imagine what a world for dragons would feel like what would it look like? I think Dragon Isles nails that, mainly because in all other expansions, the zone very much feels like a collection of activities that you should do. So the zone is really created with this idea of, right, this is the zone, here is all the activities that you have to do, and we designed the zone to make sure that you could do all of those activities. Dragon Isles feels like, no, this is a zone. There's places where dragons live, there's places where the creatures come to drink water, and there's dragons flying around, proto-drakes flying around looking for something to hunt and something to eat. And, these are battlegrounds where the proto-drakes are planning incursions and things. This is the world, and the world is alive, and there's things happening all the time, and there's all these secret little areas that you don't know about until you actually get out there and just go. And you are actually correct there, Wafflenator. Wrath of the Lich King had a very similar feel. In a lot of the places in Northrend, a lot of it felt like you were actually in a normal, breathable world. And you just happened to also quest in that world, rather than, no, this world exists specifically for you to quest in. I feel like Shadowlands is probably Shadowlands had the zones that was like the most inorganic, if we can use those two words. It was like the most inorganic. It was the most curated zones in the game ever. And Dragonflight is the most organic zones we've ever had in the game. And that feels just, it's incredible to be out in the world.
There's these local stories and wildlife for you to discover. And so the Azure Span, which is the biggest zone we've ever created, is actually over 100 world chunks. So that contrast and how you perceive that spaces when a dragon riding at these high speeds really has an effect on your experience.
You need that distance to travel, right? And then on the way, you're just looking for bridges to fly under and sweep, because you're making it fun.
Rings to fly through. And I mean, one of the things that, we're talking about the different kind of eras of World of Warcraft, really around, I think around like Battle for Azeroth era, we were looking at the world, and this is around the time when Classic was starting to be around the corner. It might have been released at the time. I forget the timing there, but you look at just the negative space in a lot of our Classic zones, and then you look at the world building that we were doing at the time in Battle for Azeroth, and it felt like things were getting kind of clumped on top of each other, right? Like it was hard to find a space that was like, look at this vista, which is just open space here. True. And if you look around just like, the world, that's very common, right? There's open fields everywhere. And it really does help to make it feel more like a,
King Julian, your bait isn't working, bro. Like, you're just full of shit. If you're actually being serious, you're just full of shit. Like, you are just wrong. Because all you're asking for is for Dragonflight to have more of the content that you care about. If you're like me, I have more than enough content in Dragonflight. Thank you very much. I like the idea of being done with the game after, I play about, let's say, 2 evenings that I play. And when I'm done, I feel good. I feel like, wow, I've done everything. All my world quests are done. This feels great. I've done some mythics. I've got some gear. This is really cool. I've done all of my profession stuff for the week. Now I'm done, and then midway through the week, it all resets. I get to do it again. I feel good when I'm done. And then I wait for the actual reset so that I can do it all again. And it is fun because I know that I'm about to be done, and then I can go play something else. Because I do want to play other games. I don't just want to fucking play World of Warcraft. I like other games. So if you really feel like there isn't enough content, do what Mr. Demuria said there. Make a fucking alt. Just start doing all of it again on a different character. You'll feel great.
Immersive world when it feels more natural like that. And I know that's something that the art team definitely kind of identified and was something that Dragonflight was really, one of the first opportunities to make change based on some of the stuff that we were seeing there.
So by now, you guys have glided through all these cool Dragonflight zones. But now I want to introduce you to some really, really cool people. Have you guys ever done the
Wait, before we go.
Brawlers Guild? You ever done Withered training? Well, it's time to meet the man behind that. Paul Cubitt has been with the company since 2006 and is responsible for so many of the features that you and I have loved over the years. Along with him, have you ever done any quests?
Tsukimi.
In WoW?
23 months part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate
Maria
you.
Hamilton.
Thank you.
Maria is the lead quest designer. And Maria has been doing quests and missions in video games since 2003. She's actually responsible for, and was the consultant for the side quests in one of my favorite games of all time, Sleeping Dogs. They're going to tell us how they fill the world in order to cater to every single style of player who plays World of Warcraft.
It's surprising how often someone will be standing there with a person with what you and I know as a yellow quest bang right in front of them, and then they'll say, cool, and then they'll turn left and jump off a cliff, and then can be completely off the rails and have no idea how to get back onto them again.
I've never considered looking at the quest NPC and going, weird. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. I mean, when you get that metric back, you're like, how do we fix that exactly?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the starting areas now in World of Warcraft, you can't do that. That you start with the quest being automatically launched to you.
Yeah.
And there's no decline button.
Yeah, that came in Kata, right? I think. When it started popping up at the bottom. I remember it being a strange experience. It was like the quests were being forced on you and saving me having to click things.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the biggest, because they always say with development of these kind of things, that you make it simple as humanly possible and someone comes along and they just do it all incorrect. What's the thing you've created that's just gone completely wrong? Or you've thought, they're definitely going to get this. This is like a funny, a little nod to something. And then it's not been until years later, but then it has been discovered.
There was a quest line in Burning Steppes where this was for Cataclysm when we did that zone. And there's a dwarf there who was seeing an imaginary character, and I can't remember his name. It's like Mr. Blinky or something like that. And so a young me thought, wouldn't it be funny if I actually made Mr. Blinky? And so I put a creature named Mr. Blinky hidden underneath the ground and way off. But if you did /target Mr. Blinky, you'd see him, and it had this special aura on him where he would cycle through different appearances. He'd look like a giraffe, and then he'd look like Deathwing. But all you could see is a portrait, so you kind of see the portrait kind of cycling through all these funny things. And and no one found it forever until it was abused, where someone found out how they could pull him, and then so Mr. Blinky, who was actually like cycling through all these different appearances, was pulled into Stormwind and had to be. It was quickly fixed. When we discovered it, we had the ability to hotfix that out.
Was it a DK? Did they grip it out or something?
It was, yeah. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, it was to my great embarrassment. I thought this would be something funny that people
Did you forget about it? And then you got a phone call. What is Mr. Blinky?
Yeah, who made this and why doesn't it exist? Yeah, so.
Well, look, I thought it'd be funny. Like so many terrible things start.
I want to say, CDJ, that's fine. People don't remember that is how we used to play WoW. Most modern day people don't remember this, but usually with World of Warcraft, the beginning of the expansion would be super OP, right? So just a crap ton of people that log in and, the servers are overburdened and the game is full. I mean, yeah, people sort of filter out and they sort of quit the game and they go play other games. Then the next patch comes in and people are like, oh my god, yeah, let's go back, dude. There's new things now to do. And they'll do the new things for a bit and they're like, okay, cool. Now I've done enough. And they'll come back for every new patch. The fact, the 1 year is that you literally just sat there playing other games till 10.2 or 10.3. Which means you had enough fun in 10.1 that you want to be back for 10.2 and you most likely want to be back for 10.3. Now, compare that to Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, where you literally couldn't run out of things to do if you tried. The game was jam-packed with just activities. When I quit Shadowlands, it wasn't that I said, I'll be back in 9.1. No, I'm done. I'm done. I don't want to play this anymore. I'm not coming back for 9.1. I'm not coming back for 9.2. Screw it. And I didn't come back for it, right? Well, I did come back for Korthia. So 9.1, because they promised that this would be the City of Secrets and there's going to be so many secrets. Turned out to not be a City of Secrets, more like a rotunda of vaguely hidden truths, right? And I didn't like that at all. So I immediately logged out. I think I played like 9.1 for like a week. And then I was done because screw it. This was not the City of Secrets that I was promised. But, that was sort of it for me. That was my final playthrough, and I didn't touch Shadowlands again until just before Dragonflight, when I was getting ready for Dragonflight. But it's already a victory. It's already a victory, the fact that you're going, yeah, I had super amounts of fun leveling. And, I had fun for a bit, but I'll be back in 10.1. All right, cool. See you back in 10.1. You're allowed to play the game that way. No one says you can't. I'm actually having a ton of fun with the rape grinds because I like the stories that come out of it, and I also enjoy the game. Like it's fun for me. That's the thing.
I had an idea.
Yeah,
I thought it was funny.
Thought it'd be funny. Turned out to be.
But for both of you, like, how do you put your character into the questing that you do? Like, those moments where you're like, we can show a little bit of personality that Blizzard's known for over the years. Like, if you look at like Kata questing, with no one rides the lady, all these serious moments, the world ending's happening, but then there's occasionally those really nice levity moments. Like, how much freedom have you got when you're putting that in? Is that just at your discretion to be like, yeah, go ahead?
Yeah, I would say there's a fair bit of freedom. I mean, we play everything before it goes out, so if there's anything that's egregious or horribly off tone, we'll flag that and that'll get changed. But in general, certainly compared to some other franchises I've worked on, which are much more serious, this is a place where we allow humor, where we want humor, we want people to enjoy what they're coming across and laugh and stuff. And people get silly. Everybody's a little different. You get silly, maybe a little punchy, and make Mr. Blinky.
I don't think his name is Mr. Blinky. It's got to be something else, but we'll look it up.
Yeah, we need to do some research.
Yeah.
Someone find the giraffe changer.
There is.
So, allow me to just the story being unlocked behind a rape grind makes sense. and I said this even with Shadowlands, I understand why certain stories have to be locked behind Renown. The thing that I didn't like about Renown was the consistent, you can only grind it this much per week, right? And then also, you would get maybe 20 minutes of content, and then that would be the end of it. Nothing else really happens. In the meantime, the things that unlock isn't really important or interesting. You have to think about it. So, for example, right now, I'm busy unlocking the tier hold questline. I'm learning more and more about tier hold. I'm learning more about tier and his relationship to the dragons. Why am I learning about it only now and not at the beginning? Simple. They didn't trust me. It's literally as simple as that. It might not seem like an important element, but why the hell would they tell you one of their biggest secrets, not knowing who the hell you are? Or, like, why should they trust you with something that, according to them at least, is incredibly important to them? You know, the dragon aspects themselves come to you when you're busy with this quest line because it's so important and impactful to them. Of course, they're not going to trust you with their secrets until they're absolutely certain that you are on their side and you're not going to just leave them. So I have no problem with that. I've always said that some story will sadly always have to be time-gated in some way, shape, or form. As long as it makes sense for that story to be time-gated. What I don't like is when the time-gating doesn't make sense, and the time-gating literally just feels like you want to extend my playtime. Then it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it should not happen then. But here, I've not felt that so far. Maybe that changes in the future, but so far I've not felt that at all, and it helps that I am having fun with the world quests, because I don't feel like I'm being overburdened with it. It's literally, it takes you about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours to do all of the world quests, and you have 3 or 4 days to do it in. So it's not like it's like a massive amount of content that you have to do. Dawn Fluke, wow, thanks for the follow, bro. Really appreciate that. Welcome to the channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I mean, if you look at Dragonflight, like zone to zone, I think you can see a pretty broad, just like swath of feelings from one zone to the next. I think of a place like Onaran Plains, which is all about the centaur, as being like this really cool feature of this culture that you might not have even been expecting to run into in the Dragon Isles, but it's got this incredible depth and these really interesting characters and interesting culture, which is all really built up. And I think it's got this cool, sweeping, epic feeling, which kind of matches the terrain around them. And then you go to Azure Span, and you're kind of doing hijinks with Khadgar a little bit. That there's magic stuff going on. There's all these blue dragons. There's some fun stuff going on with mirror images that I won't spoil for people who haven't played through the story yet. But like you do see, because of all the people who are working on the game, like a number of different tones coming out, but it all kind of comes together to the soup that we know as World of Warcraft. And then even getting into some of the local stories, I think there's some really funny local stories.
Yeah, I've read every quest.
Yeah.
I read every single quest. And I was actually, one of the happiest things I've seen with Dragonflight is the infusion of some new blood. Like even from the start, from the Evoker starting zone, is that you know these characters are coming back. I'm not going to ask you when they do or anything like that, but there's a lot of fresh blood coming in with the storytellings.
No, we want people telling different stories. We don't want people telling the same story again and again. So we encourage that diversity and let people bring, what they're interested in and their background and tales from their youth or whatever into it. And so when they pitch ideas and pitch stories, we get a huge variety and diversity. We've got...
You take us through that whole process. So I assume there's an overarching story. Obviously, this is what this zone should do. Is that given to you in an almost like bullet point form? It's like, we kind of need this to happen, and then you guys can go fill the rest in and get us from A to Z. But B, C, D, and E is up to you guys.
Yeah, as far as the main story works. For the local stories, though, that's largely us pitching whatever we'd like to pitch. And so that's why you end up getting such variety and such diversity across those. And then we also have to consider the gameplay, right? Gameplay first. We want to make sure that we're telling the story through gameplay. The gameplay matches what you're doing. It makes sense. We've got those high points, and we've got that pacing. It's World of Warcraft. You need to be killing stuff. I mean, it's important. You got to be killing stuff. So we got to find good places for that killing stuff part to happen. So yeah, it's all about like delivering on the high level goals and making sure we're hitting those points. But we have a lot of leeway in how we choose to do that.
That's really cool. So creatively, like how?
I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't understand about World of Warcraft. It is that gameplay first. Like, and I made this mistake myself, so I'm not sort of calling out anyone here. I made the mistake myself, where when I first played Final Fantasy, there was a moment there where I sort of, like, really wanted WoW to become Final Fantasy. Big Menace Snapper, what do you mean I hate Final Fantasy shilling in my chat? I love Final Fantasy, so I don't know why I would hate people shilling in it. Final Fantasy is a great game. I'm just talking about it now. I wanted World of Warcraft to take a lot more sort of like direction from Final Fantasy and how they tell the story. The issue that I very quickly realized is most WoW players don't play Final Fantasy exactly for the reason that I play Final Fantasy. They don't care about story all that much. They like combat. They like gameplay. They want to actually be able to kill things. They don't want to stand there for 20 minutes and watch a cutscene of a story playing out. And I feel like a lot of people are sort of judging World of Warcraft through the lens of Final Fantasy, not realizing that the two games do not compete. Not in that regard. Not when it comes to story. You can try to say, well, you know, how do they rank up in terms of dungeons? How do they rank up into or stack up in terms of raids? Stack up in terms of PvP? Those comparisons can be made. But when it comes to story, they're not the same. They're not trying to be the same. You just heard her say it. Gameplay first. Always. For WoW, it's gameplay first. For Final Fantasy, it's story first. Even Yoshi P has said this in the past. They start with story, and everything else sort of flows out of that story. But story is the fundamental part of where they start. People need to keep that in mind whenever they judge the two games. Or just judge WoW in general.
How many ideas per zone are being thrown in there? And you're sifting through them. How does it marry up? You know, because you've got the Onarans, you know, this nomadic culture. And then you've got the fishermen that are hiding in the coal, you know, and then they're trying to branch out and stuff. So do you get like a whole pot of stories? And you're like, that kind of fits over here, that kind of fits over here, and then sort of sift it out that way? Or is it very targeted for each zone?
Oh, we usually split up into zone teams. So we have someone who's the point for that zone for the quest design team, and there's a narrative point and a level design point, you know, and they work together to figure out what that zone is going to be. And within that zone team, they work together to come up with ideas and pitch those ideas. And so we kind of know what the themes are for each of those places and sort of what the main cultures are going to be, what the main enemies are going to be. And so they pitch around that. And sometimes somebody has a cool idea and they're like, oh, we really want to sneak Tuskarr into Waking Shores. But they're different, so they need to have split off from the tribe a long time ago. And so we try to make it, you know, make sense, right? So that kind of thing. It's pretty focused.
I do think the Tuskarr being added was a good fucking nice touch. The Tuskarr, I mean, it's an institution in WoW, right? Like the Tuskarr just makes so much sense. Plus, the little Tuskarr kids are cute as fuck.
It's not like just there's a giant pot of ideas and we're pulling them out and distributing them. It's more that we have our zone teams who are pitching things for their zones, and then we're watching to make sure that nobody's duplicating. We don't have too many of the same thing. Yeah. We're telling different stories, that kind of thing.
No, that's really cool. Like, in terms of individual projects and passion projects and stuff, because I know you've done Wither training, Brawlers Guild, like you've got some big things under your belt that are more like solo experiences.
Soon, King Julian,
right?
Probably.
Looking to get that in. Is that something you're particularly interested in? Or like you said with the Wither training, the idea was kind of in the ether, you put it together and made something. But when you get to express yourself like that with a big solo project?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, the things that inspire me are almost exactly the opposite of that. Like anytime that things feel really MMO-y is where I get really excited. And so Brawler's Guild's a good example because Brawler Guild is for sure like a solo fight. But the way that the structure of it is set up behind the scenes is Brawler's Guild really wants to have about 8 people inside of it at any given time.
Yeah.
And so if there's a lot of people, then there's lots of Brawlers Guilds. If there's not as many people running Brawlers Guild right this particular second, then there's not as many Brawlers Guild cards spun up. But what that means is that you're going to spend a little bit of time spectating. You're going to be spending some time watching someone fail or watching someone amazing succeed
we
at a
gamble all the
fight.
time.
Or,
Always.
yes.
It's so fun.
Yeah, kind of trying your gold or trying to earn more Brawlers Guild. Brawlers Gold is what it's called. Predicting who's going to win, the monster or the player. And there's something that's very MMO-y and fun about that. And so even working with things like Torghast, Torghast is also a solo thing, but it's something you can do with other folks. I mean, like one of the things that excites me, that's
What
sort of a hidden
mace,
thing
dude.
in Dragonflight is with fishing. I think fishing has always been something which has been solo, but feels better when you're in a group, like when you have the Fisher Friends things.
Yeah,
and
you
stuff, like
kind of
when
want to
get
go
those
out
big
on
raids.
a fishing mission, because fishing is something you set aside for like an afternoon,
Yeah.
right? It's like, we're going to go fishing. And getting friends to go out and do it, that's a fishing expedition with your friends, right? Virtually.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I need to watch my diction here, but there's a feature called ice hole fishing where you there's ice holes that you can kind of carve into the into the ice in Azure Span, and then you have this like lucrative fishing spot. But if people want to use it, you're all kind of in a little circle around it, like you'd imagine, right? And it's just this very natural kind of social experience, and so that's what I like when people kind of rub shoulders against one another in a.
There's
online
so
space.
much.
Well, you guys kind of have control over that,
moments,
right?
like-
Because you
I feel like the focal points in Dragonflight was also hit to a T, like kind of conjunctly related to what they're saying here, but also just what we're seeing on the screen. The world is incredibly open, incredibly freeing, and you can sort of go wherever. But every single zone have multiple focal points where you'll constantly see other people doing things in that area because there's something to do there. There's something major, something crazy, and that's what makes it feel like an MMO, because it does draw attention to specific areas on the map, and there's so many activities that require more than one person in order to actually achieve, which I think is just absolutely awesome.
You are generating the congregation hubs. That's what you're doing, because you obviously you moved from like the vanilla style where everything was just all over the place in some sort of haphazard, throw it away and you'll find it eventually kind of way. But now the questing is very hub-based, and is a big driving force. It hasn't really deviated, I'd say, since the Burning Crusade on that style. I don't know whether you agree with that. But is that literally to create that rubbing shoulders? You should feel the world being active rather than he's over there in that cave, he's over there in that mountain. Like you're going out on an adventure together. Is that a big part of the layout and design of the questing?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like we talk about hotspots a lot. That we want to have hotspots where something exciting is happening, and so then that's what creates moments like that. You'll see again, to bring it back to Dragonflight, like that happens in places like Iskara, where you have the community feast spins up every 3.5 hours, and a bunch of people flying on their drakes to make some soup together, or the hunts, or the siege on Dragonbane Keep, that are all sort of public events that exist in Dragonflight to kind of get people together. But this has been something which I think has happened for a lot of expansions in a row now, where you'll see like just something lucrative pop up on the map, something exciting, something different, and that's
I've done the feast a few
intentional,
times. It's
and
amazing.
engineered to get people to see other folks and be happy that other folks are there.
With questing in general then, because in World of Warcraft, it always felt to me that questing was a means to an end. It's just like, this is what you do, this is how it works. Is that something that you've seen change? Because you guys have so much history with the entire process. Like, how has it changed for you over the years? Like, certainly you go back to like the EverQuest days, people were just grinding and grinding and grinding. And then they come into WoW and it was considered like easy mode because it had easy questing. Well, besides the guy who threw himself off a cliff, I suppose. But how do you feel that's changed over the years?
Doesn't she?
Yeah, in some ways you could say questing is a means to an end, in that like the actual the ways that a quest is a tool that we can use to tell stories. But I think that like this comes back to like different players like to play the game in different ways, and so there is no one, like this is what the average WoW player does. There's no average WoW player. There's all sorts of different groups of players, and some people love to soak up the lore and, like yourself, read every quest in the game because they love to do so, and then look for interesting things hidden in secrets or in little books around the world. Others prefer not to. They prefer to go past the questing and move to other parts of the game, whether that's PvP or Mythic Plus or Hoot Collection or who knows what. And so we want to build a quest line which is engaging for both groups. If you were reading through every piece of text to be entertained, but also if you're skipping past it, that you still understand, can tell what the story is happening in that zone, and a lot of that comes down to things like environmental storytelling, making sure that if something's important, it's in a place like said out loud to you by a character or in a quest title or something like that. So even those folks who are kind of speed running through the zone can pick up on what's going on. But yeah, we want to build the game for multiple groups of players.
Dragonflight is changing so much. I mean, I don't know whether with the questing team or with your side of things, there's a huge philosophy shift going on in the back end with mandatory content and trying to get players to be online every single day, like forcibly almost. If the FOMO of like, oh, if you're not online, you're going to miss out on this. Has that had any effect on you guys at all, or has it been something that you're like, cool, this is good, we can have a bit more fun with our world quests now? Because they're now like several of them are bi-weekly and things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to try different cadences to try to find out what people like. I've heard people say, I can only log on this day, so if on this day it hasn't cleared yet and the next one's cycled, I feel I've missed out. I've heard others say, oh no, I have to log in every day because you're cycling them so quickly, now I have to do that. And so we're trying to find that happy ground where there's enough content for the people with the different schedules, so everybody feels like they have something to do and they don't feel like they're missing out. I mean, I think we try things, we see what worked, and then we iterate on it, usually. So I'm personally really looking forward to seeing sort of how people feel about Dragonflight and what areas we want to iterate on and improve on and put out in our next stuff. So I don't know yet. I'm actually fairly analytical about stuff like that. I like to see what players actually did, because as we talked about earlier, they don't always do what you expect. So you put something together, you think, oh, let's try this. And you
keep it very fluid
Must
as
be
well.
tough,
So it's
right?
not just like wherever the rocks in the river are forming, it's like, okay, we can go around that. That's like your approach to most of these things then?
It's mine. In design over the course of my career, it's always been about iteration to get the best result, right? So you'll try something, you'll test it internally, you'll tweak it, you'll get it to where it feels pretty good, you'll put it out, then you'll see what players think and whether or not they like it. We sometimes float ideas, we'll put in a little something as a seed, and then we'll say, okay, that went over well. Let's expand on that. Oh gosh, let me think of something.
Withered Army Training might be a good example of that, where it was fun. It was also kind of held together with duct tape a little bit. That it was built in a way which uses the tools that we had at the time to build something which is repeatable and roguelike and has some variation, run to run and so on. But that we take things like that and we learn from them, and then can build better tech, better support for our designers, so that we can build things that feel the same, but can be bigger, like the day that the deaths of Chromie, or eventually Torghast, and Horrific Visions, or all these things which kind of have that cadence to it, but we learned it by trying something.
So, question: if you could bring back one system from the past, like Withered Armor Training, or like these visions, which system would you want to see come back?
And if Withered Armor...
Not artifact weapons, someone. So not a system where power is derived from it. A system like this, which is... I know that there was power inside the visions, like at the end of it, that you could gather. I'm talking about physically just the system, so the gameplay element of it. It can't be artifact weapons, it can't be anything that brings power. It has to be just a normal system that gives you something to do that, is just its own little thing. So like Mage Tower, like with the training, something like that.
Army Training hadn't been... as fun as we thought, then maybe we would have tried something else and kept trying until we stumble across something which feels fun.
Ideas are super easy to come by. Yeah, super easy to come by. Yeah, I mean, there's that decision that has to be made. You know, which one should we pursue, and what can we prototype, and what can we try out, and where should we best spend our time, you know, and energy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, lots of ideas though. Tons of ideas.
So, how do you guys feel about cutscenes and stuff? Because you like one of the things that people always come back from. One of the biggest reactions, obviously, the animation seems incredible, but in-game cutscenes have become in Dragonflight. There's a lot of them, and they're really good, especially because you got such a grandeur of dragons and things, and certainly when it gets to Wrathion and Sibelian, you know, things get really fun there. But do you think are they used to recap as well, or is this like always the build up to a big moment for you guys?
Yeah, a cutscene can fill lots of different roles. I think the big moment is the classic one you think about, right? The zone finale ends in a big in a big cutscene, but they can also be for setup. They can be for introducing characters. They can be to let a moment land, or almost as an interlude between big moments where something happens earlier and later. I think that that we have a great cutscene team, one that is continually growing. Way back in the old days, all us quest designers had to make our own. And
did you really?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What did you make?
Again, held together with duct tape. The Hidden Master in Mists of Pandaria.
Oh, no way!
Yeah,
that's a great cutscene.
Yeah, there's some very creative things to make that happen.
I'm sure that camera is doing some tricky stuff.
Yeah. But no, now we have a team of people who are actually like
good
cinematographers. You know, good. You know, unlike myself and our fellow quest designers who are good at this thing. And they've learned so many lessons over the years of making these things. But there's a cadence. There is certainly like you can have too many cutscenes. A cutscene can be too long.
Yeah.
So certain cutscenes work really well in World of Warcraft, and others don't. And so I think that the success and the excitement that people have about the ones that they've seen so far in Dragonflight are a testament to the kind of the hard work and the philosophies that team's put together.
You can clearly see with Maria and Paul how much fun they have designing and sneaking things into games, and how seriously they also take their job. But now it's time to talk about my bias, Dungeons and Raids. You're creating a new expansion, and you're going to put in these things, and you know it's going to be a big feature, especially for those of us like me who follow and take part in the race to world first. So who better to talk to than Tina Wang, the associate art director, who makes it look like it looks, and also Morgan Day, who has a ridiculous history of encounter design. Many of the fights that you will know and love from raids, probably Morgan.
Coming back to the dungeons, I had a few questions with dungeons with both of you, but the immersion factor, which I assume is more your department in there. If we go to the raid first, it looks like Rage Fire Chasm and Molten Core. And I might be reading so much into this, it's crazy, but Dragonflight has also returned to kind of a new foundation. And it almost felt like, when I went in there and did the new raid, this feels like a statement. We're taking you back.
Right.
We're coming from there, whether it was classic influence or not. But I assume this was your team in there. It's like, was that an intention, or are you just crackpot theory on the side?
It's a mix of our teams who works on the dungeons and raids. So on the art side, I think overall, especially going to Shadowlands, even the artists, you know, people playing the game, artists working on the game, there's this sense of, oh, we're doing something so different. And I think the farther you move from home, the more there's this sense that you want to return back to the familiar. And so after working on Shadowlands too, there's definitely that desire from the team of like, okay, man, if we're going to go to the Dragon Isles, well, here's all of the favorite things from back then, right? And of course, this was also, you know, folks are playing WoW Classic. And so there was plenty of inspiration where we're like, let's just do this because it's things that we love. I think in the raid you mentioned.
I will stay with my original theory, and I will say it loud, proud, in video form so that it can be remembered for all time. This is the start of WoW 2.0. That's why there's so many familiarities between Dragonflight and Classic and TBC and Wrath. Why so many things feel so similar to what it used to be, and why this feels like almost a brand new game in many respects, with new foundations being laid out, new systems being sort of implemented that will be more long form, more with us for a really long time. I believe that. I believe that Blizzard is sort of doing the bait and switch, where rather than giving us WoW 2, they're giving us WoW Dragonflight, but it is gonna form the foundation for basically a brand new WoW. You know, which a lot of new players will look back on, and instead of talking about, you know, the old Ragnaros fight, the Molten Core entrances, and the, you know, Silithus, and the things that happened in Temple of Anchorage, people are going to look back and talk about the Vault of Incarnates, and dragon riding, and Valdrucken as the original city, remembrances of you know, days gone by. These are, yeah, effectively the new Wrath babies. Only this will be, you know, the new, like, kind of classic babies 2.0 sort of thing. So yeah, I do feel like that is exactly what this is meant to be.
Mentioned Molten Core. I think the very first pull is like these Molten Giants, right? It's like the two Molten Giants.
Yeah, you borrowed the stuff from Tol Barad, Tol de Go, the dungeon in Kata, where you do the bombing run.
Oh,
Yeah.
Grimbatal.
Grimbatal.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so it's Grimbatal, and I was like, this is a blast from the past. And then I went in there, and I was like, Molten Giants. But that theme carries on. You didn't change the theme throughout. You went for a really solid theme there all the way through.
Well, it truly made sense with the story and the content too, because specifically for Dragonflight, it's about the Dragon Isles being this really this continent that's just full of elemental power, right? Where there's the Primalists and the Proto-Dragons, and that's sort of the core of the story that's related to Molten Core. So it's the connection is sound.
That's something that we very conscientiously kind of talk about and work on is okay, we can't just have one note through the whole dungeon, right? We really feel like that break.
I haven't done the raid yet. Is it good?
Sorry, let me back up a little bit there. Like in a dungeon, we look at dungeons as a holistic experience, right? Any one dungeon being one theme, totally cool, because you're only going to be in there for like, you know, 20 to 40 minutes. When you look at a raid, you're going to spend a lot of time in there. So if that raid has one look, one aesthetic, it can start to just feel like kind of boring, and you might get tired of it. So we always try to have, you know, something like a 50% of the raid as like, okay, this is the core of it, right? This is where you feel like this is the main theme. And then we make sure that we have breakup all throughout, right? You know, with the Vault of the Incarnates, the Ice Spider, whose name I'm now forgetting off the top of my head, but
Give something?
give something the cold-hearted, I don't know, it's
Dangly
kind of one of those
spider
scary spider, right? That's such an awesome, you know, section of the raid, because you walk in there and you're like, whoa, like,
Okay, I see what you're going for. I want to come back to dungeons a bit though.
yeah, please.
Immersion style. So it's a bit of a, what we notice is you revamp these dungeons, right? And they're beautiful, the new ones, like Ruby Life Pools is absolutely fantastic. It seems to have changed. I was wondering if this is like an artistic idea or actually a more implementation idea. Is we talk about
Freya,
Alderman.
how you doing?
The original Alderman.
Vericas, how you doing? Yeah, it's a joke or normal. Thank you also for the happy birthdays. I really appreciate that. What's your thoughts on the theory? King Julian, I've already discussed this. I made that video back in BFA. Right, so if you want to get my thoughts on it, watch my video from BFA where I say Rathian proves that we do not kill N'Zoth. Like, yeah, I made that video like long before everyone else was sort of going, oh wow, maybe we didn't kill everything. It's like, yeah, fuck, I said that. Like, Jesus, I said that first. So, yeah.
Was coming from the EverQuest days. So it had the ridiculous idea that we would all hang around in the Alderman tunnels waiting for people to make groups. But it's full of cinematic, epic moments, which involve much more RPG style things, right? And that is completely cut from the new Alderman in terms of efficiency.
Which part do you mean, like?
So, example would be in the original Alderman, you would kill the dwarves, which would then create a staff, which you then go to a city, you put the staff in, and light comes across the floor, it lights the staff, the maiden comes crashing through, you travel down through these different environments, arcade.
So someone, Rathian's fight So Rathian's fight is N'Zoth showing us a vision of what would happen to Rathian. Right? So N'Zoth is physically showing us the vision of Rathian's future, how Rathian will become corrupted and eventually, become our enemy. In a raid that's meant to be the home of N'Zoth, everything else is called Visions of N'Zoth. You have this portal that you go through, and you're told that, hey, congratulations, you are now in Ny'alotha. You're in N'Zoth's home. And then you have this random ass vision about how Rathian comes to an end, and Rathian falls to the corruption, and the cycle just repeats itself. And I basically said, no, all of this is a vision. Rathian's fight is the breadcrumb that tells us that we are asleep. N'Zoth is showing us what the future looks like if we kill him. Right? So if we were to take him out, what would that future look like? How would that play out? It was a test. N'Zoth is testing us. I made that video literally at the end of BFA. And no one watched it, obviously, because I don't have hundreds of thousands of followers. But I did make it long before everyone else. I fucking called it. I should actually look for that video.
This is locked in stone. He's the last boss. We're going to do it. Is this like a Mythic Plus influence, or is it kind of an old, outdated idea to have that kind of stuff in the dungeons in WoW?
I'll hit the staff part first, but I'd love to hear Tina's take as well. There's definitely like changes that have happened just functionally with the way players engage with our dungeons. Like, for instance, if we just like drop a key and you need that key as an item that goes in your backpack, and I take that and I open the door. Okay, well, what happens now that player leaves the dungeon? Now we get a backfill. Like, does the key drop to the ground? Like, there's mechanical elements that add complexity there, but the overall element of the immersion and the cinematic factor, like, we absolutely still feel like we love that element of our dungeons, of the way we tell the story there. You mentioned the Lost Vikings. Like, while you don't get that staff anymore, the Lost Vikings actually play a big factor in the Legacy of Tyr. And like, one of my favorite moments when I first saw it, I was like, wait, what just happened? I like did a double take. Was when they like ram into the pillar like silly people, and the pillar falls open and crashes the door open for you. That was super cool. And like you mentioned, once upon a time you might have had to physically pick up an item to make that happen. We still think those aspects of the dungeons are interesting and don't want to leave those behind.
You touched on the Mythic Plus aspect of things, and it does play a factor because, all those moments of RP are just moments that players end up, working around to try to optimize, right? Like, if you recall in Maldraxxus, I remember people would be like, all right, I will die, and then I will go up there and start this event, and everyone else can catch up. So those are the things that we try to balance, but on the art side, we really do our best to create that sense of immersion and storytelling, and really build them into how much we're investing into these rooms and these spaces. Like in the Uldaman dungeon, there's these various murals on the walls too, that if you like pause and look, there's like stories that are being told, and we've invested time into those. So I think it's a case of, for those who are interested in those sorts of details, there's opportunities for that. And then also make it a great experience for people doing dungeons for the first time, getting, a very experienced player with a brand new player. We don't have to talk about where are the two pieces of the staff. That's a personal memory of mine. Of like,
I did say that aspect was great. I do remember trying to tell somebody, maybe not even native English speaker, and you're like, do you have it? And then,
silence.
But it is fun. So in Dragonflight too, there's certainly we create a lot of opportunities for that great sense of immersion and storytelling, and I think we invest more in other ways to get that across.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I noticed, because when we comparing dungeons across so many MMOs that are on the market right now, I know we sent like a note out about this. Is one thing we've noticed in nearly every other MMO, and we've got a huge internal document where we've compared every dungeon pretty much ever made in any MMO.
Love to see that.
It's pretty extensive these days. WoW is really odd one out in a really interesting way, because everybody else has fallen into an extremely static formula of how every dungeon should be. Some are split entirely into 3 parts, and each one is 5 to 7 minutes every single time. It never varies, it never changes. That's how they do their dungeons. Other companies have gone in the way of like people don't like trash. So we don't do trash anymore. In fact, we don't really do dungeons anymore. We do very quick encounters, which are because people only care about the bosses and go that way. And I was just kind of maybe not thinking about this too much until I got into Dragonflight. And every single dungeon is wildly different. You just mentioned 20 to 40 minutes. Like in the current market of MMOs, that's nuts.
Right.
Doesn't work that way, like at all. They're all very much within a 5-minute period of each other. And I'm looking at your face now like, that is not intentional. It's just we made what we thought was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, we always, like our kind of rule that we discuss is, all right, as long as I can hit the LFG button on my lunch break and get in a dungeon and finish, like we're good to go, right? But it really is about like, well, what is the experience that we want to tell? What's the place we want to explore? And allowing the team the space and the freedom to really like dive deep into that. Like some of our favorite dungeons are the ones that you will literally get lost in. And then there are other times where we have dungeons where, Brackenhide is set in exterior and it's very wide open. And certainly that causes us.
Is that the Dragonflight one?
No, that's the Brackenhide one is the null one where
yes.
You know those things that isn't WoW, but nevertheless does install on your PC? Those things, right? You probably don't have any of those. But sometimes you'll see other people like playing something and it doesn't look familiar and you're wondering what zone in WoW is this? Maybe it's not WoW. Like, no, not like kind of like Photoshop, but the kind of Photoshop that you can play. I just didn't know that dungeons are like that for other games. I never focused on that. Like, just never.
Yes, with the poison canisters.
Yeah, and like, we just love that idea of having a dungeon that will just play so much different than hall room, hall room, hall room, because we want that experience to be varied. And I'm also a very firm believer that content and systems are very tied together, right? Like, you can create a system that you think, oh yeah, this is great, this is very well balanced, but then your content pushes players to do things that start to stretch the limits.
Over 9 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are far too kind on my birthday. I really appreciate it.
Of those systems. We talking about their games and inspired by their games. I always like to look at I know you've been playing Path of Exile lately.
Yep.
And then I look at a game like Path of Exile versus other ARPGs, and just looking at the systems and looking at how those games ask you to engage with that content. Very much affects how good the build diversity in the game is, right?
Yes.
If I have to push an infinite scaling system, the build diversity sometimes gets shrunk. So I think that's a really interesting thing to look at when it comes to content. And we really want to make sure that there's opportunities for different, archetypes to be successful, right?
15 months, part of the DJ Nation. Thumb on. Really appreciate you, fam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. 38, King Julian, I think.
It's not a coincidence that in Maldraxxus, when we talk about
old as fuck, bro.
The dungeons there, the pulls are very small with big old lieutenants, right?
Yeah,
it's
big
this is
that are coming to crush.
Right, and it's this is going to be the one where if you're a single target specialist, you're going to really excel here. And then there's dungeons like Lower Karazhan, which we had some fun with when it came back in season 4.
Mr. Demuria with the $10. Thank you very much, bro. Really appreciate that. Can I get some hearts in chat? Some hearts in chat for taxes being paid. Not very degenerate of you, Mr. Demuria, but I'll take it. If you want to voluntarily pay tax, I'll accept that.
The design process also accounts for creating sort of hero moments for different classes.
Yeah, certainly.
Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah, and if you have the exact same template for all of your dungeons, then if I don't fit into that mold, how can I ever feel like I'm going to be it also promotes homogenization, right? Yeah, exactly. And everyone, we all need to be really good at this thing because that's the only type of content we make. But yeah, when it comes to dungeons, like I said, we really try to look at it from a holistic perspective and making sure that we have enough variety across all of them. And that's something that we felt has worked well for us for a long time. And it sounds like our mold is very different than other people's, but it feels like it just feels natural to us at this point.
Where is WoW going to be in 10 years? Hopefully, continuing on a path that they have set up for themselves in Era 3. Now you've seen the people behind the camera, the people behind the curtain who make all these things. Honestly, they were the most creative people I'd ever seen, and I'm so thankful that they gave us their time to be able to talk to them. Even to those people who don't get in front of camera and gave us their time and were willing to sit down with us, it was amazing. Big shout outs to Display and of course scan.co.uk, who provided the cameras for us to take with us. It was a huge, huge lifesaver rather than our big studio cameras. Before I finish up though, there's something I want you guys to see. We had such a good time and everything was all about the future. Yes, Dragonflight is out and all the things are there, but I was there to discuss how it's going to happen and how it's going to happen in the next 6 or 7 years, which is what you've seen today. And here's a little message from John and Holly about how that's going to go.
But where are we in 10 years as we wrap up here? Where is Warcraft in 10 years? Because you guys are the ones pointing the direction.
For me, I can't, there's no limits. And, you know, I can't answer that specifically, but I want us to feel like we're living in Azeroth, and I don't know what that means, and the team doesn't know what that means yet, but I think that's the dream we're going to chase, and that's for all of us, you know, you included.
Yeah, one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
You're leading somewhere.
Yeah, I think technology can afford us a lot of opportunity. Yeah, so...
She wants us to feel like we're living in Azeroth. Are they getting ready to launch Azeroth meta? Like, is this the new meta, WoW VR sort of thing? Or WoW AR would actually be the cool one?
We're dreaming big at this point. Yeah, I'm excited. Can't answer it, but it's going to be better. Or our
NFTs,
goal is to be
bro.
better.
That's what I'm hoping for. Like, the thing that I want Blizzard to do next is NFT homes. So you can actually buy an NFT that's a piece of land in Azeroth. And then that's your piece of land, and you can sell it to other people as an NFT. And then also a cryptocurrency, I think WoW could really do with like a coin. Like we could call it like the WoW token crypto, right? And then it's like really cool. You know, people can make some money and shit in crypto. I think that should be the future. Can't wait for the war coin and all into the moon. Exactly. But
you know,
exactly.
everything we do. So,
No.
sure.
You know, one thing that
mysterious.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that for the franchise, you know, WoW is really our tentpole game. In terms of the big storytelling today, a lot of that comes from WoW. That's where we have introduced new zones and new races and new characters. I want us to double down on the story of WoW and really invest in some of the characters and have long-term planning across multiple expansions. It's just so important. And so that's part of, you know, what I've been asking of Holly and her team is, you know, let's do these big arcs. Let's think beyond just an expansion and tell me what you're going to do with this character and how they're going to, you know, shift over time and why am I going to love them or why am I going to hate them or why am I going to want to, you know, be part of their team or not. So I think that's certainly, you know, going to be a change.
That would be a wonderful
that would be the biggest change ever. We spoke about this after his first interview, and I love that they're saying it again. It's just, in order for a world to feel impactful, there needs to be a journey, and journeys need to be varied. You can't have every character's journey lost to expansions. It becomes stale, it becomes boring. People, after a while, know, okay, it's 2 expansions, this character's story comes to an end. You want characters that gets introduced, killed off quickly, that can have an impact. Dragonflight, for example, had that. What was her name again? The first dragonkin that meets you on the Dragon Isles, and they sort of help you with everything, and then they die. Spoiler alert, they die. I can't remember the name now of the character, but that was like a seriously impactful moment. That was like a moment of, oh shit, I did not expect this character to die. Like, what the fuck? Sendrax, thank you, King Julian. Yes, I did not expect Sendrax to die. So you need characters like that. Then you need characters that's sort of there for half an expansion, maybe a full expansion, and their story comes to an end. And then you need those characters that's going to be there for multiple expansions, 3, 4, 5 expansions, before their story finally takes place and really plays itself out. But the story needs to constantly be visited. You can't just have it, and this is where a lot of people sort of will point to things like, oh, but we've had this before. You mean Azoth, in Legion already, and then in BFA we see a story? No, because the difference there was that in Legion, we saw the beginnings of an Old God expansion, nothing else after that, and then BFA, nothing until boom, here we go, Old God stuff now. Now we're on to N'Zoth. You need stories that build over time, and then it gets to the big crescendo, the finale of what this character is all about. And these needs to happen over multiple expansions, building up to it, but then also just shorter stories in between that to really give players different things to care about at different moments within the story. And I do think Dragonflight have a few very interesting characters that could play that role.
It does feel very stop-start. Right? It does, this arc is expansion long, and then some of them disappear. We don't see them again for a while.
And we're giving, the creative team more opportunities within the game to tell some of these stories too. You'll see that, coming up, that we're making some changes in the way we're doing.
Aish, Final Fantasy XIV would actually be a brilliant example of how this is utilized consistently throughout, right? There's clearly storylines that was introduced already back in ARR that only really came to its conclusion in Endwalker. Right? But the story started in ARR, but you would only see the finale of that story in Endwalker. But then you had stories that started towards the end of ARR, and only it would come to an end in Stormblood, right? And then stories that started in Stormblood that maybe would come to an end in Shadowbringers or whatever the case may be. So it is stories that there's throughput stories, and then there's shorter stories, and then there's sort of semi-stories, and all of those stories gives you different things that you are going to care about at different moments within the story. And those things are super important to the success of any story.
Doing the content that you'll get more of those story moments than we've necessarily been able to do in the past, because we didn't have as many people.
Dragonflight story is really good so far. I've read every quest, I've done everything, and I was like, this is good.
Story is fucking
This is good.
Good.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, the long future, we're looking at, what should WoW be in 5 and 10 years, both in, as you said, looking at technology and where is that going, and trying to predict between where technology is going, where we want to go with storytelling. And I think in general, where social gaming is going, those are all things that we want to incorporate back into WoW. And I think that, we want to see that we're doing the same thing, 5 and 10 years from now that we did back then. That we are understanding how, most of the gamers that are playing today grew up, just taking all of that for granted, and that social interaction for granted. And so how does WoW need to evolve to stay, pace of that?
No, I look forward to it. I really do. And it's nice to hear that you're planning that much further ahead. And so now saying there's going to be big story arcs as well, or that's going to be the focus. That's fantastic. But you've been wonderful. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Another brilliant episode. I don't know if there's going to be a third episode, or if maybe Preach will eventually release all of the interviews that he's done individually with everything in it. That I don't know. We'll have to probably keep an eye out for that. I think he said something about keeping it, a lot of it at least, for patrons, I think. His patrons and stuff for getting a lot of those individual interviews, or probably have already gotten it. So, if you want to see it, I guess subscribe to Preach's Patreon in order to get that. But yeah, I am super excited for the future of World of Warcraft. Just absolutely bonkers excited for it. And what's wild is how quickly that shit changed. Going from Shadowlands, where I had very little hope. I'm not going to lie to you guys. By the end of Shadowlands, I genuinely I looked at WoW and I said, there's nothing here. Right? This is just not happening. They clearly don't have a clue what the community wants anymore. They seem to have lost touch with where the community is, and how the community perceives their games. and just looking at the incredible arrogance that Blizzard had about how they interact with their community, what they allow from their community. How long did we ask them to remove Titan Forging and War Forging? And how long did they keep telling us that, oh, you guys just don't understand, it's actually really fun? And then we go, well, it actually really isn't. We're not enjoying this system. We get the idea behind it, but we don't enjoy it. And then you have the whole, ripcord ordeal where we can pull the ripcord. And then, Ian sort of sitting again down with Preach and just saying, well, actually, we decided no, we're not going to pull the ripcord. We're perfectly fine with this. And the whole community just immediately going, what the fuck are you talking about? It's kind of nice to be pleasantly surprised and also to be proven wrong. Because now I look at WoW and I think it has a bright future ahead of it. Like, if this is the beginning of what we can expect in the future, I am glad that I'm a WoW content creator, because I want to be part of that future. I want to be making videos about the story of World of Warcraft 4 years from now, 6 years from now, being able to look back at some of the stuff that happened in Dragonflight and say, oh my God, were we right? Were we wrong? Where's all this coming? Or where is all this coming from? So I'm seriously excited and also positive about the future of WoW, and this video does such a good job. So just hats off to Preach. I'll give this a like, absolutely. Yeah, Preach has just gone from being like the pillar of the WoW community to also being its greatest flag bearer, and sort of bannerman, and just absolute god. So thank you, Preach, for this one.